Moving up the organization here, we now come from macromolecules to cells. Ask you to understand organelles of an animal cell, and then focuses on transport through a plasma membrane. For the organelles, you need to make sure you know what each one does. The typical metaphor that scientists and a lot of textbooks use are to compare a cell to a factory. But most people don't actually have firsthand knowledge of what a factory is like, at least I don't. So instead, I usually have students come up with their own metaphor for the cell. What is the cell like? A typical example would be to compare the cell to a high school. The walls of the school, that's like our plasma membrane. The principal's office, this is the nucleus, this is where all the power is, where things get done, decisions are made. The electrical room, that's like a mitochondria, it powers the whole energy for the school. The dumpster is out back, that's our lysosome, that's where the garbage goes and is processed. Can you think of another example? How about if we say the cell is like a house? What would all of the organelles be if the cell is like a house or a family? What if the cell is a college campus or a Walmart or a football team? Try to think of your own metaphor and then see if you can come up with what each of the organelles would be in that overall metaphor. Let's focus today on the plasma membrane. In biology, things want to move from a high concentration to a low concentration. Think of it like moving from a crowded room to a less crowded room. That's what you want to do. You want to get some fresh air. Especially in these times, it's hard to maintain that social distance in a crowded room. So you want to high to low. This is what we call going down a concentration gradient. If the cell is moving something into a cell from a high area of concentration to a low area of concentration, this doesn't need energy. This is a passive process. We call it passive transport. But if we have to move something from low concentration into that high concentration, we have to put someone else into that crowded room, that's when we're going to need to use some energy. So we call that active transport. The membrane is selectively permeable, meaning that only certain things can get through. Because the membrane is made of fats, small, uncharged things can slip on through, like dissolves like. So things that are also fat or nonpolar, things that are hydrophobic, remember that water-fearing term, they can just kind of wiggle on through the membrane. Small things like oxygen gas, carbon dioxide gas, they're small, they can also wiggle on through. What doesn't get through are things that have a charge, so things like salts, sodium chloride, if they're charged, they're not going to get through. Bigger things like large sugars and proteins also are not going to get through. And so to get those into or out of the cell, we need to use proteins that are across a membrane. This is facilitated diffusion. We're moving things with a concentration gradient, but they need a little help in the form of a protein. If we have to move something against its gradient, on the other hand, this is when we have to use a pump. Again, active transport. It's going to need some energy. Check out the reading for the classic example of the sodium-potassium pump. We're going to see at a few different spots in the body where we use energy to move sodium and potassium against their concentration gradient. Again, taking it from a less crowded spot, putting it to a more crowded spot. So today we covered cells with a focus on the plasma membrane. And next we're going to move up another level and we're going to talk about the next tissues.